Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. A little nervous. I'm a big fan, so super
Oh, that's
honored
nice.
to
No,
talking
no
to
worries.
you and to learn more about your
That's
music.
sweet.
So you mentioned in the interview
Yeah.
that the lyrics to songs in this newest album are like little thoughts. And so to me, they seem like quite fragmented, almost like a stream of consciousness, like quite abstract, fleeting. So I was just wondering, is this an influence of like Virginia Woolf's writing? Because I think you mentioned that I
Absolutely.
have her book right here.
Well,
um,
it's funny because I wasn't a big reader when I was young because I had a lot of trouble reading.
right.
Just I have like really severe dyslexia. So like the last like 5 years, everybody told me it was okay to do audiobooks. So I was like,
Yeah.
fine, I'm gonna like. So I had like 20 years of reading catch up. And funny enough, when I got to Virginia Woolf, it was probably the closest kind of, well, not that I'm anywhere near as good as her, but the similar kind of way of doing things. In a lot of ways, I was like, oh, it's the kind of color choices she uses and just the way she thinks. So I was like, oh, I felt like since I didn't do enough reading, my vocabulary was limited. So I put Virginia Woolf in the background sometimes while I was writing, just like I was hanging out writing with her. So I can't imagine her not being in there somewhere.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
that was really helpful.
Do you think lyric writing is similar to novel writing? Like, what do you think the differences are in?
I data writer, right? So I see like what they do. It just has a very different goal because like when you write a book, you have like a long time to spend with the reader, and you can dive into much more complex ideas and then present the ideas in so many different ways that I just don't feel like you can achieve the same goal in a song
Right.
because there's already musical information as well. And I really don't really full-heartedly believe that like lyrics are a place where you change the way people think about things. It can like make you feel things because it's a very visceral art
Right.
and maybe open to you to new sensations about a topic. But I don't think you spend enough time on the page. Like if I read a book and they're discussing like a really complex theme, I have like 400 pages to like look at that theme and it develop in my head and in a certain. And I just don't believe songs do that.
Talk about the album's title a little bit. It's named Better in the Shade. And I find
Yeah.
it quite curious because, people usually associate sun with what's better. So what does the shade mean to you?
I think when I was thinking about that title, I was thinking a lot about like everybody's looking for like very like black and white answers, good versus bad answers to everything.
Right.
And I feel like when you remove complexity and you remove the gray zone, the conversation just becomes a bit stupid. When I guess the shade for me is something that is like making peace with complexity in situations that you don't have a clear answer in, and enjoying the space of not having an answer in. Like when it just gets dark and it's shady out, it's a really beautiful time. You can also look at it like that. Like the last part of the song takes place when you're a kid and you like first time you stay out way too late and you know you're late coming home to your parents, but you just can't help it because it's a special moment for you and you just have to stay out past that line. And I think it touches more on those themes.
So it's about embracing like the nuances in life.
Yeah,
And
and complexity and like, the darker aspects of life and the more difficult things to incorporate. But I don't think pretending they don't exist is a good answer. I think finding comprehensive ways of incorporating the different kind of complexities in a way that's the least destructive as possible is a much more pragmatic answer to all the having this crazy thing on top of our heads, you know what I mean?
that makes sense, yeah. Actually, in that song, in Better in the Shade, I feel like it has quite like an optimistic outlook that differs from the sentiment from like some of your previous songs and albums. So I was just wondering, like, how did you get to this attitude, especially like during a time like the pandemic, where everything can seem a little difficult and grim.
I think depending on the type of brain you have in your head, like if you do deal with like have to deal with depression or any mental health issues, you kind of just have to like make it like, oh, you're gonna make it through. It's gonna be, you just kind of develop that kind of optimism, just because if you don't have the optimism, you'll be in trouble if you hit like depressions and different aspects of mental health. Every singer has like different kind of things to give to people, and I would feel a little bit bad not giving people optimistic sensations. I would feel like, you know what I mean? It's not my job to to give
Right.
people a downer experience. Not to say that like something that like is negative is not interesting or impactful musically, but I just feel like with the responsibility I have with the gifts that I have, I feel like my job would be to give people just kind of really make people feel good. I don't know. I think it just depends on the singer. Usually when I write music, you have like when you have like ups and downs as a person, You have this moment where you're going down. That moment's not very useful in terms of the songwriting. You will write in that period, and then you'll hit the bottom. And then when you hit the bottom, you have this like bounce. And generally, I find the songwriting happens at that little bounce. And so when you hit the bottom and you like touch off, and there's an incredibly inspiring momentum to the backwards to the up when you're bouncing on the way up. So I feel like that's usually my most useful moment to write. So that might be why they may be optimistic or have that optimistic feeling, just because I feel like that's the magic spot of the whole cycle.
Right. I've read a lot of comments about your music, and also just personally, I feel like your music has a very like healing and calming and comforting effect on a lot of listeners. Like I remember I listened to like Adventures in Your Own Backyard in Ways and Love Song for Robots like during my first couple of years of college, and I was super homesick, but it just made me feel better. So is your music just as comforting for you as it is to the audience, and is the songwriting process somewhat cathartic to you?
I haven't had my computer for like a week, and I'm losing my mind right now, and I can't work. So for sure, like I'm pretty anxious and pretty hyperactive person, so I'm not really calm like my music, as you can see. So I'm guessing that like since I was pretty young, I just play piano and it absolutely makes me feel better. So I guess it would have the same effect on other people when they listen to it. Music's a pretty visceral, like once again, it's not so much there is intellectual aspects of it, of course, but I mean, it's still very much a visceral experience, you know,
Right.
Whether we like it or not. And definitely like frequencies and music has obviously a large impact on the brain.
Do you know how the body or the brain would react to different notes and different like rhythms and different beats and all of that? And do you put that into account when you're composing, or it really just comes naturally? And as you said, it's a very visceral thing.
I think I do a lot of research when I'm not composing, so that when I am composing, I'm no longer thinking and I'm viscerally reacting. But so like if I'm going to incorporate any new kind of ideas in the music, that means I did like 6 months of really bad demos where I'm really conscious of things. And then after that, once I have it more naturally, then I start writing without thinking, and it just becomes a natural. It's really important that the actual composition is somewhat still visceral for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but doesn't mean like I don't do loads of research. And one of the research I did that I thought was really funny, as I was like researching the really saddest songs in the world, or the songs that make people cry. And often people like really associate minor chords with sadness. But if you look at all the songs that actually people like Adagio for strings, which sounds so sad, there's very few minor chords, in fact, in that song. And the most saddest part of the music is on a major chord, like a giant B major, which is a very bright chord, and that's what breaks you. If you look at like To Build a Home, there's only a minor chord in the passing. They're all major chords. So my assumption is that I think the songs that make people sad are not songs that are sad. They're songs that are safe for people to release sadness. Because if you look at the chordal structures of them, they're not terribly dissonant. You know what I mean? So I'm thinking that music allows people a place where if they did have a buildup of sadness, it gives them a space where they're allowed to do it.
Right.
And
so
that's my thought.
A release of tension and sadness, and not the sadness itself.
Yeah.
Talking about sadness and feelings, back to your current album, and Height of the Feelings, you evoke like a lot of contradicting feelings. You write about like meaningless words, the contrast between a heart on fire and a cold body. As a listener, it sounds like this song is almost like a lullaby that attempts to calm and comfort like two lost souls. Like, would this be a correct interpretation? Or I guess could you just tell me more about like what's the story behind the song?
Yeah, I mean, some songs are like you said, like a collection of little anecdotes that are around a subject. I think the subject matter would be the line, I just need your touch so I know I'm here, which has a lot to do with just like inner dynamics between two people. I think me and Ariel wrote the words together for that one, which I usually don't do, which was really fun. And I would like throw out an idea and she would answer. And I felt like we weren't trying to make like a story. We were like trying to explore different dynamics that two people would have together in all sorts of fun ways. But I feel like still the guiding light was the loneliness leaking inside of all your thinking. I just needed your touch so I know I'm here, which is probably not the healthiest idea, to need someone's touch to know you're there. But I definitely feel that sometimes, where like I just I feel like a ghost until someone touches me, you know? The lyrics on Blue are probably the best on the album. I really like those lyrics a lot. The Blue was like, it's like the 7th version I've done of that song. I don't even know if it's the right one. I was really interested in the idea of being addicted to melancholy like a drug. Like, I often find people attach too much depth to sadness as if it's some sort of morality and intellectually high ground. At the same time, it's like when people like want to listen to melancholic music, it's just like listening to dance music. They just want a physical feeling. And sadness is a physical feeling as much as happiness, as much as anything else. And I just feel like people want to feel something, you know what I mean? And I don't think it should be considered a higher art form than dance music necessarily. It's not like sadness is smarter than dancing, you know what I mean? And often, so for me, Blue is like a little bit of like an ode to being addicted to being like having lower feelings as a drug.
That's interesting because even in like, you know, like ancient Greek plays and all that, like I used to think that tragedy is like the noble form of art, whereas comedy is kind of like, you know, the not so respectable form. So it's quite fascinating, like this obsession that people have with melancholy.
I can promise you it is a million times harder to write a happy song than a sad song. That's good. I mean, it's if not 2 million times harder.
Why do you think that is though? Like, what about?
I don't know. It's really hard. Like, think about like fun songs that are like really like that are fun and like move, that are like that's incredible, and make a list of those, and then make a list of like sadder songs, and watch like how much longer the sadder song list is. I think ultimately when I did Love Songs for Robots, I just feel like people take emotions too seriously, and I find that whole sentence like "follow your heart" is utterly nonsense, because if you haven't like taken care of your heart or taken care of your brain, just because you instinctively feel like that's the right way, you know, it doesn't mean that, like pragmatically speaking, it's a good idea at all, you know. I just mean don't like bite into the poison apple, you know what I mean, and make it worse. Like it's probably not real. So
so you can control your emotions, but you can't control how you react to it, essentially.
Yes, if you don't bite into them, it really changes the strength of them. Like if you have like a negative feedback machine going on in your brain, and you bite to that apple, and you want it's gonna get like loud. If you're like, it's here, it doesn't feel fantastic, it's probably has a little truth to it and a little bit of falseness to it. It's here and that's it, but you don't go It's just not, you won't feel it as strong.
Well, do you think words are accurate enough for you to like, I guess, translate those emotions, or do you feel like words are never going to be precise enough to like convey what you feel? And how do words compare to music as a language and a vehicle for ideas?
I don't think words will ever reach the complexity of instrumental music, personally. The shades that I can do in music, tonally speaking, would be very difficult to accomplish through literature. If I'm going to do like fancy music, like if we're talking about different types of theory, like a tonality of a song is a structure of your home, right? So like in music, to make feelings interesting, I'm like, okay, this is the structure of the home, and I'm going to start at the neighbor's house, but you're going to know that you're at the neighbor's house just by the notes I chose, that you're actually not home yet. All these like strange removed and little like connotations of dissonance that you can add to the sense of the whole piece is so complex. Like I'm using words to amplify what the music's doing to some extent, or vice versa. So that's why like when I'm writing lyrics, it's a little different, because the words individually are a lot more important than the sentence. And some like which chord, which note, which rhythm the word lands on colors the music and the words so strongly. But I still start thinking about the bigger picture of like what I want to accomplish before I write anything. Like the next album, I really want to focus on how ridiculous our idea of ourselves are, in a really kind of celebratory and fun way. Like we just take ourselves so seriously, and not in a bad way, because I think it's good we do, but at the same time, it's quite funny. Like everybody has this like really different realities that they really are into and will do anything to protect, which I find really lovely too. But it's also like absolutely absurd. It's like totally ridiculous, and it's in a lovely way, not in a ironic kind of way.
I feel like your music merges a variety of like musical genres. So what about each genre like inspires you the most? What composers and musicians, whether like modern or from before, influence you the most?
To be honest, like I listened to a lot of pop and hip hop before this record because of the way it's mixed. And often like people like talk about pop music being so stupid, and I'm like, guys, like if you understood how complex those mixes are to make them move the way they move with that many moving parts and the way they jump out of the speakers, it's a real art form, mixing pop music to dance and the way it moves. So I was listening to a lot of that just for reevaluating how I mixed for this record. Classical music, I always listen to lots of classical, but anywhere from Debussy to Satie to Stravinsky to Chopin. I'm not like a Mozart fan, and Bach recently, but Bach really for pragmatic tools that he has. Like he's just a bit of a genius, right? So how his voices move, you can bring into any type of music. So in terms of like modern rock or like, I mean, I really love the Ways Blood movies, that song. I love this record by Caroline Shaw, which is a neoclassical record called Orange. It's just string quartet. The new song called Sirens with Flume, which is another poppy, super electronic stuff. I love the way it sounds and everything. I was very inspired by Bjork when I was younger, just by the way she mixes all the music.
Right.
But I'm like, I listen to Cardi B and I'm like, I wish I was Cardi B for a day. And, you know, I listen to all sorts of things, and it's not really about the genre. It's more about like, I like watching people's intentions. So I don't really copy necessarily what they do. I copy what their intentions are, and I find that a bit more useful.
What stands out to you about Cardi B, for example? I'm just curious.
First of all, musically in the mixes, they're excellent. Like they're the best in the business. Like from a sonic point of view, I think it sounds way better than any of the other hip hop guys does. I love the tone of her delivery. She's obviously a really smart woman. She's a bit like Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
She plays that card, but she's actually really brilliant. Yeah. The confidence and the delivery behind, and the sense of humor and the funniness, the awareness she has in her lyrics. I think she's more badass than any of those guys. She's just a really brilliant woman. I find her super inspiring. I feel like people like think about musical styles as like their identity, which is I think a totally ridiculous way of doing it. Sometimes you need Cardi B sometimes you need classical music for this. Sometimes you need heavy metal because you're angry. Like they're all just different tools to give you access to different sensations. And I feel like whenever the music business started to make them categorically like, these are the clothes you wear for this and all that nonsense, I feel like they took away the best part of music. Like, I think it's nonsense. I think you need some people like that. You need the Billie Eilish, you need the Madonnas. And you also need the smaller, more home-cooked food sometimes, you know? And I think it's more about having a balanced diet with your ears than like picking your identity because I listen to hip hop, so now I just wear hip hop clothes and I'm like a hip hop person. Right. Like I find that silly. Or like I listen to like heavy metal, so I'm going to dress up like a vampire to show you what kind of music I listen to. Like it's boring. It's like I listen to heavy metal sometimes because I find it really fucking cool to listen to. I don't need to dress up as a fucking vampire to listen to it. Right. And it doesn't give you more credibility behind the music. You know what I mean? I just feel like all these musics have like really lovely things to offer, and the more they put these like, if you listen to this music, you have to wear these clothes and this kind of kills the fun of it all, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I used to listen to like Nightwish, but that didn't mean that I dress like a goth.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, why do they have to add the whole, like, you have to wear the uniform? It's crazy.
Yeah. All right, I have one final question. It's easy for people to take for granted things that have become too familiar to them. You said that people forget what made Amsterdam like magical, like all the little things. So I'm just like curious, were there any elements like that struck you when you were in China? Any stories or people that stood out to you as you were there and who inspired your work?
One of my most intense experiences my whole life. So I was like 18 years old and I was traveling to Vietnam and I was doing a layover in Hong Kong and I'd never traveled anywhere in my whole entire life. It was the first time and I was by myself. And my friend was like, oh, you should stay at Chungking Mansions. The building of like craziness of all Hong Kong. The last place you want to go if you've never traveled before is Chungking Mansions. It was shocking. And I was like, I just had never really experienced the world before. It looked like Blade Runner the first time I landed. I was so in awe. I find that city looks magical. I thought Beijing was magical. I just find it a magical place. And I don't think it's just in China. I remember in Vietnam, some of the things that people said to me changed my life forever, you know. There's a certain wisdom that we don't have here that it's a give and go, but every time I go there, I'm just very moved, you know. I can't wait to go to Shanghai. My favorite place in Beijing was I went to this underground after hours music social club where you get to the door and you do like a special knock, and if you're a musician, they let you in and stays open to 6 a.m. It was the best. I love that.
There's a bunch of those in Shanghai as well. I actually grew up there, so I'm very attached to Shanghai. Yeah, if you think that like Hong Kong was like Blade Runner, Shanghai is just like Blade Runner. It's pretty awesome, pretty dope.
Well, it's funny because when you land in Hong Kong, it's like the buildings go up the mountain, right?
Yeah.
But if it's foggy, there's a mountain. Like when I first arrived on the train, it looked like the buildings were like 600 stories tall because I didn't realize they were on a mountain. So I was like, holy fuck. This is like literally Blade Runner. But yeah, I mean, I wrote a song called Beijing. I love being on a bike in Beijing. I don't know. I have a little bit of a soft spot for China and Southeast Asia in general. I just really enjoy it.
Well, thank you for talking to me today.
It's a pleasure.
I'm just really happy that we had like this conversation because again, big fan. This is like an honor, a dream come true. So yeah.
Well, that's very nice. It was really fun to talk with you. That was a very fun interview. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you in San Francisco maybe one day.
Yeah, sure. Bye.
Bye. Have a lovely day.
You too.